Congratulations to the W5 team of CTV, producers Eric Zetto, Maria Teresa Scotti, reporter, producer Avery Haynes, cinematographer Jerry Vigneault, and editor Angelo Altamare. The W5 report Narco Jungle, the Darien Gap, aired in March of 2024. 1 month prior to that, we all heard the news that CTV's long-running investigative program, W5, was canceled. What happened? It was February of 2024 when we heard that news. This was the last report, and they pushed for it to be aired under the W5 banner. Someone got it kind of right. Later on, the W5 team, an investigative team, did emerge, but this is just one of the many challenges of a report like this. This reporting is immersive, taking us, the viewer, into a world that most of us have only experienced at a distance, the harrowing journey of migrants desperate for a chance at new beginnings. So desperate that, as the reporting so vividly shows us, that families, babies in arms, pregnant women, migrants from Venezuela, they're from China, Ghana, Haiti, will put their lives in the hands of the Gulf Clan cartel who police the Darien Gap. The gap between them and the American or Canadian dream is a 60-plus mile land passage between South and Central America. But even if they are successful in this leg of the journey, asylum is not promised, and the second leg of the journey is full of its own peril, as we see in part 2 of the reporting, The Death Train. The W5 team not only took bodily risks, clandestine meetings with the gun-wielding cartel leaders who patrol the Darien Gap, and making the grueling 6-day trek alongside the migrants themselves, they take risks in the way they chose to report this story. In this high-pressure, high-stress scenario, they are able to approach the reporting from a place of true compassion. It's done with the journalistic rigor necessary to tell the story without losing sight of the humanity of their subjects. A boy with a guitar, 2 jovial young men from Ghana, a young, heavily pregnant woman who turns widow partway through the journey. The balance in tone and story is handled deftly. The use of self-tape journal-like reports from Avery Haynes takes us that much deeper into the jungle with the crew. The journey towards refugee dream, as we see it unfold, is more of a nightmare. Over the years, there has been an increasingly brutal crackdown on migration by sea and by air. So this passage, on foot through dangerous, dense jungle, deep swamp, river crossings, up and down treacherous mountainous terrain, we are told is the only way. These families and individuals face the ravages of climate change, of political upheaval, personal persecution, unbearable economic hardship in their home countries. The air of desperation is palpable watching this broadcast. In 2023, over 500,000 migrants chose this path northward. As the W5 team reports, the path is littered with the remains of those that became injured or too weak or tired or discouraged to continue the journey. Add to that the threats of violence and attack and robbery from factions who see the migrants as prey and the Darien Gap as a hunting ground. It can be very hard to unearth narratives of the crisis of human migration without the noise, the buzz of partisan punditry creating an intentional din around the basics of human suffering. This is why this reporting matters. Yes, we learn of the policies that set the story in motion, but the journalists are able to cut through the extraneous noise and bring us a clear-eyed picture. When I was in elementary school, I had a really good friend. His name was Hai. He was an unbelievable athlete. I mean, he could jump anything. It was the early 80s, and I remember he and his family just showing up one day in my small town. Scores of Vietnamese families settling in southwestern Ontario, seemingly out of nowhere. I had no understanding of the Indochina refugee crisis back then. I did hear whispers of boat people, but my understanding of that was rudimentary. I didn't know that what his family went through to get to Canada, what they were fleeing. I don't think anyone asked, and I'm not sure Hai or his parents would have answered. Call it an immigrant's code. Don't ask, don't tell. I do know that they were welcomed and their passage could not have been easy. The world is so very different now, and the reporting being honored tonight is so vital in helping us understand how to engage in conversations that are happening in government, around our dinner tables, here in media, today, putting the faces of children and moms and dads and singers and laborers, just people, at the forefront of a story of humanity, a story of globalization that demands our attention today. More of this, please. It's a pleasure to hand out the 2025 Hillman Prize in Broadcast Journalism to the W5 team. Congratulations.
Thank you for the honor. This is incredible, and thank you for recognizing the work that we did. When we first finished the Darien Gap, everyone asked us, like, what was it like to do it? And to sum it up in one story or one sentence, it was impossible, right, Jerry? Yeah. We had a million stories to choose from and highs and lows. So for me personally, I think, well, the one that stands out, there's many, but the one I want to talk about at least is the one in the beginning of the doc with that little kid. And it was a 7-year-old boy who came with his sister, who was 4 at the time. They're from Sierra Leone. And it's just haunting hearing their voice tell the story about the Darien Gap and how they did it. But they leave Sierra Leone in 2019 and they go to South America. They go to the Darien Gap. They go with their dad and they get separated from their dad at one point. I remember them telling me that. And then they also see people getting injured. They're seeing dead bodies along the way. Like, imagine a kid, 7 and 4, seeing these things as they come to try to get to the US, try to get to Canada. They eventually get to the US, and then they meet up with their mom, who ends up going through Oxum Road, and they end up in Scarborough. But before they get there, their father he has to go back to Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone. He's forced to go back. So after all this, they're on their own in Scarborough with their mom. He, once again, goes back to South America and does the Darien Gap again. And he goes and does it, goes to the US, ends up in Canada, and that's how we meet him. And if you get a chance to talk to Jerry, our brilliant cinematographer, after, he has a hilarious story about how he met this family and why we interviewed them. But I guess I just wanted to, that's just one of those stories where I think I just wanted to note, they were the lucky ones. Like, they were actually the people that made it here, and we met so many people along the way that didn't have food, that didn't have water, money, and you just knew that they may make it out of the jungle, but they probably wouldn't make it out of Panama. They wouldn't make it to the US. And there's a lot of stories like that. I'm going to end this shortly. I just wanted to say a big shout out to the support that it was required to get this story done. There were just so many people that helped us, assisted us, made sure that we were safe. Starting off with our executive producer, Derek Miller, who just said, go for it. And that was amazing. Because they canceled the show. Because they canceled the show. They're like, all right, let's just go for it. But also, and just my partner, Champagne Choker, and my child, Jade, who's a beautiful kid. But also, she's an amazing kid. But also, Mel Brecknell. She was supposed to come on this trek with us. She broke her leg 3 weeks before we were supposed to go on this trek. She was going to be our doctor, essentially, our medical doctor. And she spent weeks, maybe months with us, trying to figure out how to tie knots for hammocks, getting us the right medical supplies if things went wrong. Did you know that you have to wash your feet every night after to disinfect, to remove, so you don't get trench foot? Well, she taught us those things. Like, she kept us alive. Like, those are those skills that we didn't have before we went there. So, and sorry, I'm going along here, but the other part of this is she was waiting for us at the end in Panama at the migrant center when we, with the broken leg walking boot. She was there for 3 days before, checking with every migrant boat to see, hey, where's this Canadian documentary crew? Are they okay? Like, what can you tell me? Because we had no cell phones. We only had a sat phone, so we could only kind of ping our GPS coordinates. And she would ask them, and forgive me if I'm screwing up the story, Mel, but she would be like, well, where's the guy with the camera? Oh, Jerry, right there. Or like the tall Asian guy. I'm like, okay, well, there's only one tall Asian guy in this thing. So, but she was crucial to this. And if she wasn't there on the trek, she was there in spirit the whole time. So anyways, thanks, Mel.
That's my wife that he's talking about. She was going to do another adventure with us. The very first security briefing I had told me to pack condoms. And I was much more naive then than I am now, and it was because you will be raped. And so while each of us dealt with different fears in the beforehand of what this experience might be like, for Maria Teresa Scotti, who couldn't be here tonight, our producer, field producer, fixer, woman extraordinaire, rape was a big one because rape in the Darien Gap is huge. Many, many women are violated along that walk, as we saw in our documentary. My young son, happened to be listening to that security briefing on the stairwell and heard that, and was really angry with me. Like, why do you have to be the person to tell this story? He said, some bald guy has done it for YouTube. Why do you have to do it? And a bald guy has done it for YouTube. And I said, because he's not telling the story the way that we'll tell it. And our motivation from the very beginning, and this all began in a crazy way because I was on vacation and I happened to end up on the border between Costa Rica and Panama with my wife and with a couple of other people. And we saw this huge group of people, a massive group of people living in this football field. And the people we were with were scared and didn't want to go in. And Mel and I obviously were not, and went in and heard this extraordinary story about the process that they had gone through of surviving the Darien Gap, and they've made it now through Panama and into Costa Rica. And I actually FaceTimed Jerry, and I said, Jerry, Google the Darien Gap. Like, we have to do this story. Like, this is just unbelievable. I don't think most people know about the Darien Gap and that 500,000 people are risking the lives of their children and their lives for the American dream, which I knew and we all knew from the minute we took the first step in that jungle. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist for migrants. And that's ultimately very, very, very clear now. And I explained to my son that it had to be told the way that we were going to tell it, which was to humanize. The people we were with didn't want to go in. By the time we left that border area, they were buying food for them. They were buying sanitary products for them because they had met them and they got to understand their plight. No one wants to leave their country. No one wants to leave their home, and no one wants to leave their culture. And all I could think of is, in a world where migrants are a number and not a person, it was really important to humanize people who were so dehumanized. And that process continued. That process continued as we followed those families, 3 families, 2 of whom are now in the United States risking being kicked out. And they did it right. They went through the Biden administration process of applying through an application for amnesty. They did nothing wrong. And they are now living in fear again. But we followed them through Central America, through Mexico, jumping aboard something called the Death Train, the Beast. And we did a documentary on that, Jerry, Maria, and I, and Angelo. And that process of them crossing into the United States and now still living in fear. And Maria Teresa Scotti, I have to say, could not be here tonight. And when you travel a jungle with a group of people, as we all have, you get to know each other in ways that are pretty intense. I wish she was here because this is an extraordinary, in the journalism world, we call them fixers. I prefer to call them local producers because that woman translated, orchestrated, dealt with narcos. Jerry and I first met her years ago. She did my very first cartel interview with a Sinaloa narco boss in Mexico. She had to go into hiding. I got to go back to Canada. Just like the migrants, I got to go back to Canada. But anyway, Maria is an extraordinary producer, a local fixer who really made this happen, as did Mel, and as did everyone on this stage. And Angelo's, the curse of the editor is that they are not in the field, and they have to translate what we experienced for you to see. And in the midst of, under this cloud of the death of a show that had been on the air for 58 years, Angelo's ability to bring that story so that you all could feel that journey the same way that we experienced it is extraordinary. So, and I also want to say thank you to the Hillman Foundation. I'm well aware of the incredible work that you do and who you honor, and I'm really grateful that W5 won this in its last year on the air as a weekly television show. So thank you. And Jerry just wants you all to know. Jerry lost, so I'm sorry, I'm going to get off the stage, I promise. But Jerry's used to walking around with we travel with 8 Pelican cases of equipment, which we could not do in the jungle, so he had to scale back down, and he now loves the iPhone for shooting, I'm just going to say.
I hate you.
Jerry lost 12 pounds en route. I lost 9 pounds. That's in 6 days, so that'll give you an extent of just sort of the physicality that was required for this. Anyway, thank you so much. Really, thank you.